I tapped my fingers impatiently on the steering wheel as I waited at a red light. The final stretch home from the airport. A grin stretched across my face as I thought about surprising Claire with my early return from the business trip. I could already picture the delighted look on her face when she saw me walk through the door a day sooner than expected. As soon as the light turned green, I hit the gas, my BMW surging forward. In a matter of minutes, I was pulling into our driveway and cutting the engine. Grabbing my carry-on from the back seat, I strode up to the front door, my keys sliding into the lock. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. I frowned, wondering if Claire had gone out. Setting my bag down, I called out, "Claire? Honey, I'm home." No response. I made my way upstairs, figuring she might be taking an afternoon nap. As I neared our bedroom, the sound of muffled voices reached my ears. Odd-Eye paused outside the closed door, straining to make out the words. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable rhythmic creaking of our bed frame. Ice flooded my veins as realization struck me like a sledgehammer to the gut. My hand trembled as I grasped the doorknob and flung the door open. There they were, my wife Claire and that weasel Leo Martinez, my former driver I had fired for theft, naked and intertwined on our marital bed. Claire gasped, her eyes going wide with horror. "Evan." Leo simply gaped at me, frozen like a deer caught in headlights. A red haze of fury clouded my vision. I stood there, clenching and unclenching my fists as I struggled to find words. Leo was the first to move, hurriedly gathering his clothes and bolting from the room, leaving a naked and crying Claire behind. "Get out," I ground out between gritted teeth. "Evan, please, let me explain," she begged, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I said get out," I roared, snatching her robe from the floor and flinging it at her. "Pack your things and get the hell out of my house." After that, everything was a blur of motion and tears as Claire rushed to dress and gather her belongings. Somehow, I found myself standing in the driveway, watching her peel out in her car, destination unknown. I stood there long after she had gone, the cool night air doing nothing to quell the inferno of rage burning inside me. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, snapping me out of my daze. Betrayal, by the woman I had trusted most in this world. I clenched my jaw, a cold determination settling over me. If it was war they wanted, it was war they would get. The next morning, I tracked Leo down at the pizzeria where the deadbeat was now working as a delivery boy. Ignoring the lunchtime crowd, I stormed inside and confronted him right there in the dining area. "You piece of trash," I snarled, grabbing him by the collar of his grease-stained shirt and slamming him against the wall. A startled hush fell over the customers as all eyes turned toward the commotion. Leo's eyes were wide with fear, but he quickly regained his composure, that cocky smirk I loathed so much returning to his face. "Whoa there, pal. You might want to chill before you do something you regret." "Regret?" I laughed bitterly, tightening my grip. "Believe me, the only thing I regret is not firing your worthless hide sooner." Leo shrugged, his nonchalance only fueling my fury further. "Hey, she came onto me, man. I was just doing what any red-blooded guy would do." A vein throbbed in my temple as I fought the urge to crush his smug face with my fist. "Listen up, you low-life scum. You're going to pack your trash and get out of this city. If I so much as see your ugly mug again, I'll make you wish you were never born. Do I make myself clear?" Leo's bravado faltered for a moment, a flash of fear in his eyes, but then the arrogant mask was back in place. "Yeah, whatever you say, Mr. Moneybags. You really think you scare me with your tough guy routine?" I leaned in close until our faces were just inches apart. "Try me." With that, I released him with a shove, straightened my suit jacket, and turned on my heel, storming out of the pizzeria as a chorus of murmurs followed in my wake. My chest heaved with anger and indignation as I climbed into my car. That worm Leo had awoken a rage in me I didn't know existed. I needed to strike back, and I knew just the person who could help me rain down hell on that cheating snake. I pulled out my phone and tapped the contact for my old buddy Hank Thompson, a retired cop with a knack for digging up buried secrets. "Hank, it's me," I said as he answered. "I need a favor." By the next day, Hank had delivered a file on Leo thick enough to choke a hippo. It contained his entire sordid history, petty crimes, outstanding debts, illegal side hustles, you name it. I could scarcely suppress a grin as I flipped through the damning evidence. First order of business: get Leo fired from that pizzeria once and for all. I paid a visit to the owner, a greasy loudmouth named Anthony Marconi. "Evenin', Marconi," I said as I strode into his dingy office without knocking and tossed the file onto his desk. Might want to take a look at that. He eyed me warily as he opened the file, his beefy face paling as he scanned the contents. What is all this? I folded my arms across my chest. That's everything you need to know about your beloved employee, Leo Martinez. Quite the upstanding citizen, isn't he? Marconi swallowed hard, beads of sweat forming on his brow. I had no idea. He'll be out the door first thing tomorrow. I allowed myself a tight smile. See that he is. I'd hate for word of his extracurricular activities to get out. Could put a real dent in your business, if you catch my drift. With Leo taken care of, I turned my sights on my next target, Claire. I met with my lawyer the following day to begin divorce proceedings, armed with evidence of her adultery, pictures, text messages between her and Leo, the whole 9 yards. My lawyer warned me that given the state's harsh stance on infidelity, this would likely get ugly. I simply shrugged. Good. I want her to hurt like I've been hurting, and hurt her I did. With the affair proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, I secured a settlement that awarded me the lion's share of our assets and ensured Claire would be left with next to nothing. As I signed the final papers, I felt a profound sense of vindication, of justice served. They had betrayed me, and now they would pay the price. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. The worst was yet to come. A year had passed since that fateful night when my life was shattered. In that time, I had managed to piece things back together, at least on the surface. With the substantial settlement for my divorce, I landed a cushy new job as a private wealth manager at a prestigious firm. I traded in the house that had once been my home for a sleek, modern condo downtown. All the material trappings were there, the luxury car, the designer suits, the exclusive country club membership. Yet despite the opulent veneer, something vital was missing. A hollowness gnawed at me from the inside out, a residue of bitterness and anger that had seeped into my very bones. You seem different lately, Evan, Jessica, one of the firm's senior partners, commented over cocktails one evening at an office function. I arched an eyebrow at her, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. Different how? She shrugged, toying with the cherry skewered on the rim of her martini glass. Harder, I suppose. More ruthless in your dealings. Not that it's a bad thing, necessarily. Just an observation. My jaw tightened as her words struck a chord. Was I really that transparent? Or was the persona I had so carefully crafted starting to crumble? Evan, you still with me? I blinked, forcing a tight smile. Yes, sorry. Just thinking about this big client I landed last week. Jessica seemed to buy the deflection as she launched into the usual office small talk and ass-kissing. I nodded along, my mind wandering as it so often did these days. Despite my best efforts to move on, the past kept rearing its ugly head through the grapevine of mutual friends and acquaintances. Claire and Leo, it seemed, were still together, though struggling to make ends meet in the wake of my legal onslaught. Rumor had it they were planning to skip town soon for a fresh start elsewhere. I tried not to let it get to me, to take satisfaction in their misery. But the vindictive part of me couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of justice. They had betrayed me, and now they were paying the price. It was a brisk morning in early spring when my phone rang, Claire's name flashing across the screen. I frowned, debating whether or not to answer before grudgingly tapping the green icon. What do you want? I said flatly. Evan. Even through the tinny speaker, I could hear the strain in her voice, the weariness. Leo and I, we're leaving Madison. For good this time. I rolled my eyes. And I should care because? We'd like to see you. One last time, before we go. She paused, and I could almost picture her worrying her bottom lip with her teeth like she always did when she was nervous. To ask for your forgiveness. I barked out a harsh laugh. Forgiveness? After what you two did to me? Please, Evan, she whispered, desperation creeping into her voice. I know I don't deserve it, but I have to try. If not for me, then for your own peace of mind. I opened my mouth to reject her, to tell her exactly where she could shove her forgiveness. But something made me hesitate, if only for the briefest of moments. Fine, I ground out. Meet me at the park downtown. 2:00. Don't be late. I hung up before she could respond, already questioning my momentary lapse in judgment. An hour later, my cell phone rang again, the number belonging to my boss. Evan, are you sitting down? His tone was somber, heavy. I frowned. What's going on? He exhaled slowly, as if steeling himself. There's no easy way to say this. There's been an accident. Claire and Leo were in a car wreck about an hour ago. They didn't make it. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, stealing my breath away. Dimly, I was aware of my phone slipping from my grasp and clattering to the hardwood floor as a roaring filled my ears. This, this couldn't be real. Not after everything. Not when I had been so close to. A jumble of emotions swirled within me. Shock, sorrow, guilt, regret. Never-ending regret over all the hateful words I had flung at Claire, at how badly I had mistreated her in those final days out of my own wounded pride. And now, she was gone. Any chance of making amends, of granting that forgiveness she had pleaded for, evaporated in a twist of cruel fate. The next few days passed by in a blur. I requested leave from work, shutting myself away in my condo to process the enormity of it all. I realized, with a painful clarity, how badly I had allowed my emotions to control me, to cloud my judgment. My quest for retribution, justified as it may have seemed at the time, had only succeeded in inflicting unnecessary pain. On Claire, on Leo, but most of all on myself. How could I have been so blind, so arrogantly convinced that I was in the right, so wrapped up in my own bruised ego that I failed to see the bigger picture? The questions swirled endlessly, a constant torment with no relief in sight. That's when I knew I needed to turn to someone wiser, someone who could help guide me out of this labyrinth of anger and regret. That someone was Hank. I found him at his usual haunt, the dingy bar where he could often be found shooting the breeze and knocking back a few drinks with his old buddies from the force. "Hey, kiddo!" He greeted me gruffly as I slid into the well-worn booth across from him, his brow furrowed as he got a proper look at me. "You look like hell warmed over. Everything okay?" I opened my mouth, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain the turmoil raging inside me? Seeming to sense my inner struggle, Hank leaned forward, his expression softening. "Is this about Claire and Leo?" I could only nod mutely, my throat constricting against the lump that had formed there. Hank let out a heavy sigh, running a hand over his grizzled jaw. "Listen, son, what happened, I can't even begin to imagine how much that must have hurt. But holding on to all that anger and hate? It's only gonna poison you from the inside out." My chest felt tight as I struggled to draw a full breath. But I never got the chance to. Hank held up a calloused hand, quieting me. "I ain't saying forgiveness is easy. Lord knows it's one of the hardest damn things a person can do. But you've got to find a way to let it go, to make peace with the past. Otherwise," he shook his head somberly, "otherwise it'll eat you alive, and you'll never find peace." His words struck a chord deep within me, their wisdom resonating in a way I couldn't quite put into words. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I felt something loosen in my chest, allowing me to breathe a little easier. I met Hank's gentle gaze, giving him the smallest of nods. It wouldn't be easy, this journey toward forgiveness and healing. But deep down, I knew it was necessary, if I ever hoped to find my way back from the abyss of anger and bitterness I had been trapped in for far too long. Hank's words nagged at me, pushing me to take that first difficult step on the road to redemption, facing Claire's parents. I steeled myself as I pulled up to the Anderson home. Frank opened the door, his eyes hardening when he recognized me. "Evan, the hell are you doing here?" I met his glare steadily. "I need to speak with you and Diane, if you'll let me." He grunted and stepped aside, allowing me entry. Diane rose from her chair, lips pursed in disapproval. "So, the prodigal son-in-law returns. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see," I said, holding up a hand to forestall her. "But you need to hear me out." They traded a silent look before Diane gave a curt nod. The room fell into an expectant hush as I gathered my thoughts. I won't make excuses for how I reacted after. I swallowed hard, pushing past the lump in my throat. After Claire's affair, the way I lashed out, the cruelty I showed her in those final days, it was inexcusable. Memories of happier times flickered through my mind. Claire's radiant smile on our wedding day, the joyful tears in her eyes when I surprised her with a trip to Bali for our anniversary. We had been so deliriously in love once upon a time, and then she shattered that blissful existence with a single act of selfish betrayal. The recollection caused my jaw to tighten, but I pressed on. I allowed my anger and wounded pride to twist me into someone monstrous. I was so consumed by vengeance that I failed to see reason. I shook my head slowly. It was a mistake I will regret until the day I die, because it cost me the chance to grant Claire the forgiveness she pleaded for in the end. Diane's expression softened with something akin to pity. Frank simply watched me, his brow furrowed in contemplation. "I know there is no making up for the unforgivable way I behaved," I continued roughly. "But I'm here to beg for your forgiveness, If not for my sake, then for Claire's. She deserved so much better for me in those final days. A heavy silence descended, thick with tension and fraught emotion. Diane was the first to break it, rising from her chair and pulling me into an unexpected embrace. Our sweet girl wouldn't want us bearing grudges. You know that, she murmured, her voice wavering. I stiffened initially before returning the hug, a knot in my chest loosening ever so slightly at her words. When she released me, Frank fixed me with an appraising look. What's done is done, he said gruffly. No sense dwelling in the past anymore. Their offer of forgiveness settled over me like a balm, not quite absolving me but granting a sense of acceptance, of being able to begin forgiving myself. Over the ensuing months, I felt those dark impulses, that gnawing emptiness, begin to dissipate at last, one I tended to through frequent visits to Claire's grave. You'd be proud of me, you know, I said one evening as I settled onto the neatly trimmed grass, fresh flowers in hand. I'm finally learning to let go of all that hatred and resentment. I allowed a wistful smile as I reminisced. You remember that rat trap car of yours in college? That death trap on wheels you insisted on keeping out of pure stubbornness? A low chuckle rumbled in my chest. God, I don't know how many hours I spent under the hood of that junker, swearing like a sailor trying to keep it running. My smile faded as quickly as it came. Of course, that all seemed so trivial after everything imploded. All the laughter and memories we built. It felt like they had been tainted by what you did. I sighed heavily, raking a hand through my hair. And that's what kept me so angry for so long, you know? Not just the affair itself, but the fact that it cast this pall over all the wonderful moments we shared, making me question whether any of it had been real. Meeting the Andersons, experiencing their forgiveness and compassion, it was like a veil had been lifted. I could finally start reclaiming those cherished memories. Our hasty wedding at the courthouse during spring break, that first ramshackle apartment we could barely afford, lazy Sundays spent tangled in sweat-damp sheets. The good stuff, the reasons I fell so damn hard for you in the first place. I murmured, tenderly tracing the letters etched into the marble headstone. I'm not saying I've fully made peace with what you did. I don't think that wound will ever truly heal. But I'm learning to accept that the broken pieces can still have value, that they don't negate all the beauty that came before. When at last I rose to take my leave, it was with the first true sense of lightness, of hope, I had felt in longer than I could remember. The path ahead remained shrouded in the dappled shadows of the past, that much was undeniable. But at last, I could see the light at the journey's end, a promise of the lasting peace and absolution I had sought for so long. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.